Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar organized by Luxinnovation in the context of the Interreg Pôle Automobile Européen project, so-called PAE. My name is Auert. I am managing the Automobility cluster hosted by Luxinnovation, the National Innovation Agency in Luxembourg. It is my pleasure to be your host today and to introduce one of our industry champions, the Cebi Group, represented by Mr. Etienne Jacqué, you can see on the screen next to me right now. Since 1976, CEBI has been manufacturing electromechanical products for the automotive and household appliance industry. The product range covers a wide variety of components, which you will have the privilege to discover in a few minutes. Before we get into the subject, please allow me to say a few words about the PAE project. And to do so, I like to share my presentation. Here you can have a view of the project, a quick summary. So the PAE project brings together 5 Belgian, French and Luxembourg partners and 5 German associated partners under the coordination of the Chamber of Commerce Grand Est in France. It is co-financed by the European Regional Development Funds via the Interreg PAE Greater Region program. The main objective is to strengthen the competitiveness and the attractiveness of the Greater Region's automotive industry through coordinated cross-border action, such as the technology site visit we are organizing today. The ambition of the TSV is to represent remarkable and innovative technical solutions and services in order to promote business opportunities and initiate cooperation with companies in the neighboring regions. If your company wishes to be represented in one of the next TXV, please get in touch with your local PAE representative. The next slide is giving you an overview of the upcoming events we are organizing in the coming months. The next TSV will take place in January with the company V-Optics from France, which is offering innovative solutions to characterize, control, and analyze reflective surfaces. End of November, the PAE project will be present with a booth at the BE40 exhibition in Mulhouse. The traditional Automotive Day will take place this year on the 14th of December in Speyer, Germany. You are all cordially invited to participate and meet your peers from Rheinland-Pfalz and Saarland. Most important, do not miss the forum Tomorrow in Motion in June next year. It will be the biggest PAE event with hundreds of participants, technical conferences, large exhibition, B2B networking session and site visits. If you need more information on those events, please take a look on the PAE website. You see the website address here on the bottom side of the page. With this being said, let me drive you now quickly through the agenda. We are going to start with a general presentation of the Cebi Group done by Mr. Etienne Jacqué, Corporate R&D Manager. We will follow with an overview of the development and benefit of Industry 4.0. And finally, you will understand how you could access testing services supported by the new laboratory of Cebi. As you can see on your screen, we are using a polyvalent digital platform which allows you to chat and ask questions. We have planned time at the end of the presentation to review them and exchange on collaboration opportunities. We encourage you to make use of those functionalities as we want this session to be as interactive as possible. Now I am pleased to welcome Mr. Etienne Jacqué, Corporate R&D Manager at Cebi. Etienne, can you please introduce yourself and say a few words about your role and responsibilities?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Etienne Jacqué. I'm Luxembourgish, based in Luxembourg. My background is a mechanical engineer, actually in applied thermodynamics, so that's combustion engines. But even though I spent some time of my career in combustion engines, it's widened out to the car, so I'm not too much concerned about the big changes coming up in the next 10 years. I spent 26 years of my career at Delphi in Luxembourg, now called BorgWarner, since the takeover. And there I was in charge of various components around the powertrain, including tanks, ignition systems, but also some accessories. And since 2018, I work for Cebi Group, based in Steinzel in Luxembourg, and I'm responsible for R&D. So that means basically all the product technology across the organization, innovation, and of course related subjects, for example, subsidies and collaborations and those kind of things. So today, unfortunately, I have to excuse both of my colleagues, Mr. Guillaume Policarpo and Mr. Nicolas Hoffmann, for two completely independent reasons. I will cover for them, but I will introduce them or their role as we get to the agenda subject. I cannot hear you, Anthony.
Sorry. Thank you. I said thank you, Etienne. I guess you have a presentation now that you are going to share with us.
Sure. Okay. So let me share. So the first agenda item here is the Cebi Group to present the company to you. That will take about 30 minutes. According to the plan. This is to start with a visual showing our products. So you see a large number of, I would call them mechatronic products around the car, but also for household goods. There are about 35 product families here, maybe not even all represented here, but just to give you a flavor, some of them go on the engine, but most of these components actually go on the vehicle body. And from that perspective, they are agnostic to whether it's a diesel, a gasoline, or an electric car or something else. From that perspective, we are quite lucky that we are not too much affected by the change, and it's more of an opportunity than a risk when we go to the electromobility. But that is also part of my role, is to figure out what changes and where we can develop new components to serve the new mobility market. Another simple chart giving you some flavor of what we do is this one. We sold over 200 million parts in 2019. That is about 1 million parts shipped out every day somewhere in the world. Now, these are small parts, but still it's a huge amount in terms of managing the logistics, managing the part numbers, managing the supplies and the materials around these parts. We have about 5,000 active part numbers at a single point in time. Those are saleable goods. Of course, as you know, working in the automotive industry, every one of these parts has to meet the highest standards, but also each of them was the cheapest offer. No doubt about that. So this is the environment we work in. The company, in terms of size, it's 3,500 employees. Of these, it's about 650 in Luxembourg. The rest is mostly in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. 11 production sites, 7 R&D centers. So we are decentralized in terms of development, with about 300 employees in the R&D area. Then we also have one development center for assembly lines. So we do not only design products, but we also design assembly machines, automated lines, and we have a number of sales offices near to the main customer locations. I will not go through the detail of the history. The company is about 45 years old. The most relevant milestone in the life of the company was 2011, when there was a management buyout done from the initial owner that was Italian, now to a Luxembourgish owner based in Luxembourg. And with that, there was also the creation of a headquarter company or a main holding called CEBI International. But both CEBI International and CEBI Luxembourg are based on the same address here in Luxembourg. So this structure exists for 10 years now. Also, the name of CEBI was only created back in 2011, even if you see it down the history here, but that is only to remain consistent. We are still in integration mode, and I will come to that when we talk about digitalization. Like I mentioned already, the company is a conglomerate of smaller independent factories, and we maintained that principle since the merger, so that we are quite decentralized, but at the same time, of course, there is great opportunity to do things together, and that is a large part of my job, is to figure out how can we benefit from each other to put our components and our knowledge together and explore those synergies. From a map footprint perspective, we are heavily centralized in Europe, I would say, in terms of our people, but also in terms of our business. About 85% of our turnover is Europe. We do have a plant in Mexico, one in Brazil, and one in China. Mexico and China are growing very fast, which is obvious due to these large markets developing there. But they are still small compared to the rest of Europe. So we are basically a European company, but we can serve global customers very well. This slide, I picked only a few slides for corporate presentation here. Corporate social responsibility we see as a key element coming up. And with the recent crisis and the swing to carbon neutrality, even more so. In fact, I would be really interested in the context of the PAE here to find out where everyone is in terms of decarbonization. Because we get a lot of requests from customers to express our commitment to being carbon neutral at a certain moment in time. We fill many forms. We do a lot of calculation down to the fuel consumed by the ship that ships our parts and so on. And it's really a jungle in a certain way to figure out what to do to respond to this need. And we're also too small to push this down our own supply chain. Okay, so we're interested to understand where everyone is, and if somebody has a good idea on how to approach the subject of decarbonization, I would be interested in some feedback on that. Anthony also asked me to talk about this a little bit here. So what is our strengths and why are we competitive? We produce small parts that are often sold at less than €1 in Steinzel in Luxembourg, which is close to Luxembourg City. It's by no means a low-cost area. So how can we be competitive against all our competition that is in Eastern Europe or in China? I think it's a number of elements. The vertical integration is one of our strengths. So we buy raw material and we do all the transformation ourselves. It's quite rare that we buy semi-finished products. In larger companies, this is not so welcome because that is a factor taking floor space and competencies. But in our case, it's proven to be quite a good thing to keep the value add in-house. As I mentioned before, that also not only pertains to the product, but also to the machine building. So we have a company making our own machines. And so we even have the value added of the equipment in our house. Then the long-standing experience, we do have some long runners, some products that are 40 years old that are still selling very well. You could call them cash cows. Again, some companies get rid of these to make space for innovative products, which is good. But at the same time, these products are very low maintenance and they generate a revenue stream that is quite reliable. So from that perspective, I think that is a good element of the strategy. Then innovation, likewise, is important. You all know that. I don't need to spend too much time on that, but it's something that we are pushing. As soon as we notice there is an opportunity to dive into a new product, we push that, and we bring up a new product or even a new family almost every year. Okay, then I want to dive a little more into the product, but not spend too much time. We divide our business into 4 different sectors. It's the automotive sector, it's the household or white goods sector. Then there is a small residential and industrial sector with mainly ventilation and air conditioning products. And then on the right side, the electric vehicle sector that is seen a little bit to the side for the specific components in power electronics. But as you can see on the bar chart or the pie chart on the top, most of it is automotive. We actually attempted to diversify, and that is maybe worth another discussion also at the end. Especially during the crisis when no cars were sold back in 2020, we considered, okay, where can we sell our products outside of automotive? And we identified around 20 sectors where similar products are sold. But then we also found out, okay, it's a different world. In some cases, the quality, for example, is way lower. In other cases, it's way higher, like in aviation, for example. But also the way of doing business is different, the network is different, contracts are different, so you can't just diversify overnight, except if it's something that is coincidentally very close to something you do already. So we did not do that step in the end. We remain an automotive company with a 15% non-automotive share, but I'm interested to hear if somebody else maybe has made a step like this and what their experience is. So now the automotive products, you see it's a little bit all around the car, sensors, switches, plastic containers, plastic parts, interior and exterior, electric motors, closing systems, actuators, heaters. There are a few pages here that show the products in a little more detail. Like I mentioned, the smallest temperature sensor is way below €1. The largest product we sell is maybe in the range of €30 with an integrated washer system, multiple pumps and pipes and nozzles and so on. So it's in that range where we navigate. I repeat myself, but I insist here that, for example, in case of a washer reservoir like this, we buy the raw plastic, we buy the sheet metal, and we do everything in-house. So the value chain is all under one roof, and we control the entire flow of material from the raw material to the final product, which is one of our secrets, if you will. Further products, some switches around the engine. These are oil pressure switches. Mentioned already the water pumps. These are washer pumps for the windscreen washing, but now you also have these pumps that are turning the cooling liquid around in electric cars. Of course, you don't have a mechanical pump anymore, so they need to be electrical pumps. And by the way, there is more than one because you have more than one circuits. So this is a new product coming up that is already sold at millions and going up very steeply. Good opportunity for us. Likewise for some valves, pressure control valves, flow valves, check valves, and so on. Then there is some heaters. less used in electric cars, except for maybe passenger compartment heaters, but these were more engine-related fuel heaters or anti-ice devices, and this is a business that is going down and then replaced by some other products. Further down, actuators, so everything that moves a flap in the air conditioning system or that moves your headlamps up and down as a function of the vehicle load, those kind of actuators we're very strong at. And then we're also showing some electric vehicle components. Just a little anecdote, we were actually one of the first company making electric cars about 15 years ago. This was a Renault Twingo converted to electric. About 1,000 cars were built and sold in the southern Switzerland area. And then we stopped again because all of this was based on a sodium battery technology that didn't make it against the lithium polymer batteries. So that battery technology was sold, and with that, basically the electric car production was stopped. But there's some product left, like the electronic DC-DC or AC-DC converters, actually a traction motor and so on. But we don't have the battery anymore, and then all these technologies are I would say, obsolete right now because it's evolving so fast. So this is more of a historic product for us, ironically, in the current times. And we do not have intentions to re-enter the electric powertrain market again, because there are so many players already, and it's too big an investment for us to try and get back in there. So we remain on the level of the individual component or the small systems. More products, small electric motors, about 25 million per year for window lifters, seat motion, and also automatic door openers for certain cars. Then you have latches, not for doors, but for hood or trunk. So the hood latch, of course, is a mechanical latch, and then the trunk latch is an electrical latch in most cases. Now with electric cars, it's very interesting because the hood becomes the trunk in some cases. So you need to have an electric opening and closing system also for the trunk with different safety requirements than, for the hood with different safety requirements than for a trunk. So this is, for example, a new product driven by electromobility that has nothing to do with the electric drive, but that is still a new product because the electric car is constructed a little different than the current vehicles. And the new product that we introduced just 2 years ago is large plastic parts. You see a complete bumper here, and then you also have some exterior and also interior decorative parts. These are currently only made in Brazil, but it's an interesting business that we discovered because we do have very strong knowledge in injection molding, and so far we only use this injection molding to make our own parts until a customer told us, you know, why don't you offer a bumper or an interior trim? And we found out that with the knowledge we have, it's something we can do. And since then, this has been a growing business for us. Then I want to cover briefly also the other side of the business. So household, dishwashers, dryers, washing machines, suction hoods, fridges, and ovens. If you look at your oven at home, you probably have this fan in the back, and it's likely that this is one of our motors. We supply all of the electrodomestic suppliers in the world, so we're really very present. It's not big business, but it's a stable business. Then you have fridges with these little fans that move the air around the fridge, so you don't have any cold spots or warm spots in the fridge. You have the thermostat for the fridge, and then some small thermostatic or bimetallic switches. This is the product that I said is the never-dying product, even though you would say that today you can easily measure a temperature and have an electronic control of a temperature and do a switch, but the mechanical bimetallic switch is unbeatable in terms of cost and reliability. So that all the dryers and all the devices, also like coffee machines, they still have a bimetallic switch inside, and most likely this was built in Steinsen here in Luxembourg. And there is another piece of business with larger fans used, for example, in passive houses where you have a forced ventilation system with heat exchangers. And also here, when you look at this picture closely, you see the center part, which is an aluminium casted part. And we even do that in-house. So we have an aluminium casting factory just to make this one part because we verticalize as much as we can. Also, the plastic is made, the winding of the motor, the epoxy potting, the electronics is made in-house. The electronic circuit boards are produced in-house as well. So that is a real nice example of a product that goes from casting to high-tech electronics all under the same roof, and actually physically under the same roof. I mentioned these products already, so no need to talk more about this. So this covers it for the products. In terms of technologies or know-how, I mentioned the manufacturing technologies, so metal stamping and cutting, deep drawing. In some cases, we have very old machines that are automatically stamping and stamping and stamping the whole day with no maintenance because they are old and robust machines. These are very small parts, like, for example, connector pins we do in-house. But if you look over time, you save a lot of money if you do this in-house, because buying these parts, especially when it's small quantities, could be quite expensive, actually. So this is something we do ourselves. Then I mentioned aluminum die casting, rotor winding, injection molding, electronics manufacturing. We have 4 electronic lines making circuit boards with surface-mounted reflow process. And then the usual plastic assembly and bonding techniques like heat staking, ultrasonic, or also laser welding. In terms of design, we managed to complete the life cycle of the product. So basically you start with simulation, then you do a prototype, then you develop your product, you run it through a validation cycle, and then you release it to the vehicle. So all this is done in-house, and you just have an example of an acoustic facility here, for example, to look at the noise from a window lifter. We also look at electrical noise, for example. So this is the standard equipment for an automotive component supplier. Maybe it's worth to mention, though, that we remain at the component level. So if you come visit CEBI, you will not see vehicles or test tracks. That is a weakness, because I think when you develop a component, you always want to know what that component does on the car. But in a lot of cases, we don't get access to these cars, and we are basically held against a requirements document and a certain test protocol. I'm working on that, and we have some partners in Luxembourg that work on vehicles that have test tracks. So we have access to this, but for the moment we are not equipped ourselves. In terms of innovation, I mentioned already, so we innovate on the process side, we innovate on the product side. I would say the major trend we see today is the smartness of the product. So when you have a temperature sensor or a heater, typically you have 2 pins, you connect them to 12 volts, and then they do something. In the future, you will have 3 pins, and the 3rd pin is a digital interface. And so inside your part, now you have electronics that controls the part, that does self-diagnostics, that maybe has some intelligence to figure out what the signal actually means, and then talks to the central controller. So we see an increase in content of our parts in terms of electronics and intelligence. And the other trend we see also is that customers like to go to systems or module suppliers. So instead of buying 5,000 components making up the car, they want to buy 50 modules and systems and not worry so much anymore about what is inside the module or the system. So we are also obliged to move to system integration, and that is mentioned on the bottom here, or to partner up with a system integrator that we supply with components, and then the system integrator takes care of making the components work together and sell them as a module or as a system. That trend is not new, but with the electric cars, it becomes more pronounced. Then in terms of industrialization, and we will talk about Industry 4.0 as well in a separate agenda item here. The company that makes our lines is called Bimatic in Italy. It's serving only ourselves, so we do not sell equipment to the outside. At some point we were thinking about that, but you have to organize yourself quite differently if you want to serve external customers. So this remains a purely in-house operation, but about 60–70% of our lines are actually built in-house. And last but not least, open innovation is getting more and more critical. I will come to that also in the Industry 4.0 section, but we see more and more the benefit of working with public and private partners, also smaller startups that have specific knowledge in a very specific area. I could mention laser welding, for example, where we had a certain need, and we worked with a PhD student on that and really developed a completely new process within a good short time, simply by partnering up with the university and having a student working here. So it doesn't have to be difficult and expensive, so we have very good experience with this. Maybe a few words about Luxembourg. So this is a drone view of Steinsel, where we are located. You see in the center here the R&D and engineering offices, and also the headquarter offices with the administrative functions. And then the 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings that have a little triangular shape there in the middle. This is the manufacturing plant divided into the raw material conversion from sheet metal to stamping or the injection molding. And then in the other building, you have an assembly operation that makes the final product. Luxembourg makes about 300,000 parts per day. So in terms of size, yeah, you have some numbers here. The picture here shows the new building, and I will come to that. We did a new construction just 2 years ago. Actually, we moved in last year. This is an R&D building and an administrative office, but unfortunately what's not seen on this picture here is a relatively large new testing lab that is also open for services to the outside. And that I will come to that in a moment. On the right here, you see our mix of customers, or rather the companies that we ship to. So we actually do ship, of course, France and Germany, yes, but also outside of Europe from here. Actually 15% to non-China and another 10% to China from Luxembourg. So it sounds a little bit like an inverted world, because normally, especially for the type of products we make, you would rather say you make them in China and then you bring them to Europe. While in our case, it's the opposite, sometimes driven by customers, you know them, VW, for example, that you supply a vehicle in Europe, and then that vehicle is also produced in China So you just ship the component to China rather than building a new manufacturing line for perhaps a relatively small volume. So that is really the effect leading to the fact that we are exporting to China. So this is Luxembourg. Now you see the same products, but Luxembourg focuses on the washer tanks. So you see these reservoirs with the washer pumps and the pipes. Also telescopes for headlamps, then the heaters for passenger compartments, small switches and sensors, mainly the temperature sensor. We are one of the European leaders of temperature sensors, so it's very likely that your car actually has one that was built in Luxembourg. This is, we're making over 20 million per year. Then smaller components, for example, here the diesel heater with some that is integrated with the filter, and also heaters for the de-icing of the blow-by duct in the combustion engine. So those are the Luxembourg products. And then on the household side, a little more specifically, you see these cartridges here that you can still find in many household machines. These are bimetallic valves. Each of them has a different temperature spec. So if you want to wash your laundry at 30 degrees, it's this one. And if you wash it at 60 degrees, it's the other bimetallic switch. So with all the electronics, we are still selling this as being the most robust and durable way to control the temperature in certain devices. Okay, this concludes the presentation of the Cebi Group. I see some question here. What is the gross margin of the group, please? I can tell you the turnover. It's about 450 million turnover, not margin. We never reached the 500 million goal. It was supposed to be reached in 2020, but then of course COVID hit and the automotive sales went down. So we've been stagnating a little bit over the last 2 years now, and this year will not be better in terms of revenue. I can't give you information about the margin, unfortunately. Do we have other questions in the meantime, or should I move on?
I propose that you move on, Etienne. I just saw one question, so we'll accumulate the other question we might get at the end of the session. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the next subject that was prepared by Guillaume Policarpo is the Industry 4.0 project. Guillaume is our leader for the Industry 4.0 innovation project. He has a background, of course, in industrial and IT. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. It's a pity because he knows a lot about the subject, and it's a very, very wide subject. So I will cover for him as best as I can. But if you have more detailed questions, then of course we can set up a follow-up with him on the subject. First of all, why digitalize, or why do we go to Industry 4.0? You all know that we are basically squeezed between two blocks. One is the pressure to standardize, simply because we cannot afford to have variation. We cannot handle too much complexity. So we try to be as common and as standard as we can. But on the other side, we get pressure from the customers to diversify or to customize because vehicle models change more and more often. Regional differences cause variants of the same product. And as soon as there is, let's say, a small change to be made, it has ramifications across the entire process. So you have to have this flexibility to be able to adjust your process at any moment in time in a quite flexible way. So the space in which we move is becoming more and more constrained. And the only way out of that is really to digitalize. So to have to replace hardware with software, to replace physical installations with logic that can easily adapt. So I'm thinking about, for example, a press versus a robot. To change a press, you have to buy a new one, basically, but to reprogram a robot, this can be done in a day. So that is one way to give you more flexibility in certain operations. If we talk Industry 4.0, in our case, it's part of a larger program that is called One CEBI. One CEBI is basically the program under which we integrate the different companies and factories that make up the group. So it goes across everything, also organizational, and even the name CEBI, as I mentioned before, is new since we came together. And you see here the elements that make up this One CEBI program: QMS, TMS, ERP, CRM, MES, and so on. But then if you look more closely, they are all digital. Okay, so really what you have to do to integrate a company and to make it work in a common way, they are all digital processes, pieces of software or databases that you just have to merge, and then it's very easy to work together. So the Industry 4.0 is no different. It's a digital innovation program, even though it does have, of course, hardware related to it, but it's part of a larger initiative that has a very high content of, let's say, digital intelligence. Why do you digitalize? These are some of the benefits that we see being a production company. You get real-time data. The data is visible, which is sometimes the challenge in itself. It's traceable. You keep all the history. You need it for compliance, especially when it's a critical characteristic of a product that you want to know how it evolves over time and whether it is within spec. Now you can track it, you can correct it, you can adjust it, and you can prove it. So compliance is a big element here. Efficiency, of course, you want to have your machines running. And as I mentioned before, the diversity, so that you can adjust very quickly to new designs or other conditions that change without having to go in there and unscrew any machines. The bottom of the page here says this data-driven decision-making. That is, of course, the ultimate aim of Industry 4.0. You start with collecting the data, then you analyze it, then you aggregate it, then you look at it, and then you make decisions upon it. And you can automate each of these steps, but making automated decisions is, of course, the last and the most difficult step. And we are not there yet, of course, but we're getting prepared to have certain artificial intelligence helping us say in what way, for example, a process has to be adjusted based on historic knowledge that the machine has collected. These are some of the partners I mentioned before, the open innovation, and here you see some of the partners that are involved in the Industry 4.0 project. Luxinnovation was actually the first one helping us to find the partners that we brought together in this project. So those are the SNT of the University of Luxembourg, and then a startup called Data Things that is strong in data analytics and artificial intelligence. And we put together a large project that is also funded by actually by both the Ministry of Economy and the FNR in Luxembourg, the Fonds National de Recherche. So it's basically the Ministry of Research funds to support this project. It's a project that has multiple facets and multiple work packages to it, and each one of them has either the character of, let's say, applied innovation or advanced research, and from that perspective, the funding behind follows a different regime. But it's all, let's say, a large partnership. Just to mention a few other names, for the quality management system and the product lifecycle management system, we decided pretty much a year ago to go with Siemens. So Siemens Team Center and Siemens Op Center. We are going live as we speak right now. That is a very interesting journey because we're going from a traditional company working a lot on paper processes to this fully integrated system, and it's by no means a simple change in terms of cultural change. So we are going through that in parallel to the Industry 4.0. Then we also have a CRM already installed. It's more or less a browser-based platform called Salesforce, well known on the sales side. And then we also found out that we need help in terms of change management. So we went to a Luxembourgish company called Mindforest that is specialized in helping to communicate internally, to train people, to prepare people for the change, to make sure you accompany them in every step. And I did not even know that this existed 1 year ago, and today I'm happy we have this support, because otherwise we would have done many mistakes in terms of getting people prepared for the change. So this is a very, let's say, large number of mega projects going on right now. What is still missing is the connection between all of them. So the next step will be that this one talks to this one. I don't know if you see my mouse, but you know, you can imagine what I'm pointing at. So you want to have all the data that is collected actually aggregated between the sales part and the purchasing part and the production part of your company. We are far from that, but with all the data now being available in digital form, it's not that difficult to think about connecting it all. So that is an interesting journey. More specifically on Industry 4.0, so I said it's a large program with multiple facets. We divide it into 3 groups of projects. The first one are the Industry 4.0 research projects, and I have an example on the next page. Then there is an MES, a manufacturing execution system implementation project. So that is a little more down to earth, where you buy a module that allows you to handle your manufacturing operations. So that is more classical, more standalone. But of course, in our case, we plan to integrate that with the rest of the Industry 4.0 modules. And then the last element is process innovation project. So you don't only connect your machines, but you also change them from, you know, hydraulic press to a robot or an electrical press, so that the machine itself actually also can accept intelligence and can, let's say, be used in a more flexible way. So as we innovate the data part of the process, we also innovate on the process itself. The ambitions are clear: efficiency, to handle complexity, agility, responsiveness, serve customers and employees, reduce time to market. I mean, you know, all these buzzwords that are easy to say and then a little more difficult to actually turn into reality. So I promised to talk about one research project. In this case here, it's simply to connect the machines. So of course, the first step is, does my machine have a plug where I can extract some data, and what is that data? Is it just counting the parts? Is it collecting forces and temperatures and pressures and motions? Does it recognize each part? Does it serialize the part? Does it keep traceability information? So what data can you collect of each machine? And then, of course, the first parameter that you try to calculate real time is the OEE. Now, there are different definitions of what OEE means, but I think it's operational equipment effectiveness. So it means that if your equipment is theoretically available 100%, then it is, of course, that 100% is reduced by its availability, its performance, and the quality it produces. And that it gets you a number of, let's say, 80%. And now you have to figure out where the remaining 20% come from, and what is the root cause and how you can get higher than 80%. In the past, we had these numbers already on a piece of paper that was posted next to the machine. Typically, those were numbers from the week before or something, and you could by no means understand what was actually causing the number to go up and down. And today, we get this number basically minute by minute, and it also gives you the information, well, what was it that caused this number to go up or down, and even recommends what you should do about it, because some of these root causes are known, some are new, and you have all this information on a dashboard like an iPad, and you can look at it real time. So that is a tremendous benefit to being able to visualize what's going on in your machine even before you actually reach the machine. You can do this from home or from vacation if you want. So the steps I mentioned already, but you have some pictures on the bottom left here. The first phase is just to connect your machine, and we use this gateway, this little orange box there that is really a computer, where it collects the data from the machine and then it sends it to a central server. The second step is to have an IT infrastructure that allows you to collect this data with the right, let's say, storage capacity and the right connections. You haven't done anything with the data yet, but just collecting it is different because it comes in all kinds of formats and frequencies. The next step is then to run it through data analytics, monitoring applications. So you aggregate it, you visualize it, you analyze it, you display it. You still haven't done anything with it other than looking at it. And then the real next step, that is the last phase of this research project here, is to take the data and extract decisions from it. So to learn from it, what are the trends, what are the root causes, what are the factors influencing my results, and can I optimize the production maybe piece by piece by applying what I learned from the data that I'm collecting every day. And of course, you cannot do that. Man cannot sit somebody in front of a PC and take those decisions, but you have to do some processing so that it turns out, let's say, the things that you want to see. And this is what S&T and data things are working on here. This project here is about 2/3 down the road. So we started 3 years ago. We have connected a number of machines. We have a number of these platforms running. And we are now in the phase to actually take the first decisions based on the data. But I can tell you also that after 4 years, the project doesn't close and then we are finished, because the more we develop, the more we find new questions and new opportunity to do better and different. So for sure, there will be a second project following right behind. And I can imagine already that Industry 4.0 is a continuous journey and that really never ends. I already hear about Industry 5.0. Not sure exactly whether there is a common definition about what that is already, but I'm sure it builds upon, let's say, the wishes or the learnings coming out of this experience once you've gone through that. I also mentioned the manufacturing execution system that is much more down to earth. So it's basically a platform that allows you to manage the data related to production planning, the work order management, traceability information, so part by part data that you just have to track and store in case of issues with your customer, maintenance operation, reporting, and also connections with the PLM and the QMS. I mentioned before that our systems are not talking to each other yet, but as the data comes in a more and more, let's say, standardized and consolidated form, it becomes obvious that you can connect these systems and now have, let's say, a common source, single source for everything, and be able to see everything on one system without having to switch platforms, for example. My last slide regarding Industry 4.0 is a little a comment related to things that you sometimes forget. Cybersecurity is a very important subject. Our production server is not connected at all to the rest of the company for cybersecurity reasons. Let's say you get an intrusion and somebody can modify your machines. It could cause even a fatal accident, or it could completely stop your production. So it is very important to consider cybersecurity from the beginning. And we've done it the same way. We've just not connected that server to anything outside, so it cannot be directly accessed. Infrastructure is important. Do you have what you need in terms of IT infrastructure? Never underestimate what it takes to get simple things done that appear simple, but in the end they are not. Then your people upskilling, the user experience, very important. Is it user friendly? Language comes into play. Change management and culture. Are you ready to handle all this data with people that have worked on their press for 30 years, and now you tell them, here's an iPad, please start using it? It's by no means easy. So that is an element of Industry 4.0 that we absolutely have to consider upfront. Otherwise, we will be standing there with our iPad all alone, and nobody is really, let's say, adopting it, and that would be a waste of time. Okay, so I am done with the Industry 4.0 parts.
Etienne,
my question is again,
if I can interrupt you, we got quite a few questions regarding this section. So before we go to the test lab, I propose that we go through those questions so we have them fresh in mind. For example, in the question sections, we have a question from Christian Thijs from IE. So basically what you described was the digitalization of the production line. And the question is, are you as well doing some sort of digitalization for the engineering processes?
Yeah, we are. Actually, I mentioned it briefly. It's the PLM, the Product Lifecycle Management, and we chose Siemens here. So Product Lifecycle Management is what? Basically, it is a system in which you do your design, your 2D and your 3D design. So whether it's CATIA or NX, doesn't matter, but you work on the platform, and the platform manages your products and all your CAD data, your drawings, your specs, your documents, and it also provides workflows. So for example, if I want to release a drawing, in the past I print it out, I take it to my boss, he signs on it, and then I scan it or something. And today, this is a workflow that I just do a mouse click and I say, I want to release this drawing, and then it automatically pops up on the screen of my boss, and then he can look at it and fill out some sections, and then it's released. It's called Siemens Teamcenter, but of course there are other similar platforms from other suppliers. So don't quote me on Siemens right now. We are just going live as we speak, so I cannot give you some real hands-on experience yet. But it seems very powerful because now all of a sudden you have access to a great amount of information. You can put as many attributes to everything as you like. So for example, it allows me to know, okay, how many O-rings I buy across the company, and do I happen to have an O-ring that is similar to the one I just designed? What material is it made of, and so on. So you can access to all this information and handle it in a much more real-time way. You have full traceability, and it allows you to track the history of everything, so you don't need to worry about documentation anymore, because that is completely automated.
Okay, another question. Since a lot of your equipment are now connected, are you as well measuring the electricity consumption of those equipment?
That's a good question. I think as long as the machine gives you this piece of data, then yes, it can be done. I think it really depends on what kind of data the machine produces. I think a modern machine can give you everything, including the consumption, temperatures, all kinds of things that are measured. Whatever is measured can be extracted, yes.
Okay, and one last question regarding Industry 4.0. Actually, there are two questions. How big is the team working on the project? And second one, you install different IT system as a preparation, like the QMS from Siemens. How did you do the selection of the system, as you have different supplier chosen?
Yeah, regarding the first question, the core team is about 5 people, meaning 5 CEBI employees working full-time on Industry 4.0. But then you have the S&T, you have data things. So these people also have offices here when they work on site. So then it's easily 5 more people that are physically around the machine. And then you have a lot of internal areas that need to support, for example, the IT area, the production area. So we have people assigned to assist the project, but that are not, let's say, fully dedicated, because they have other jobs. So it's really difficult to say, it takes 10 people or 20 people to do Industry 4.0. And of course, it also depends on whether you want to go step by step. So first you connect a few machines and then you do the next step, or you do it rather like we do, and you say, okay, I do the connection and I do the artificial intelligence and I do the processing innovation and I do, all kinds of other things in parallel. So you take a more aggressive approach. But I would say you don't do Industry 4.0 with a small team. It really requires multiple disciplines, and also, let's be frank about that, quite some investment in new equipment and these gateways and all kinds of IT infrastructure to be able to get something out of it.
Okay, and the other question was about the selection. So what was the process you follow to select all the different equipment that are required?
So, well, equipment or softwares, the equipment, I can't really say much about it because I really don't know how that was selected. It's IT equipment. Let's say these gateways. I think most likely that the company Data Things came up with it as their, let's say, standard, and we just adopted it. But I can ask the question just to make sure. Regarding the others, it's a regular sourcing process. We actually used a consultant for the product lifecycle management system because we did not know much about it. You have 4 or 5 large suppliers in the world that, Siemens being one of the 2 large ones. And then you have maybe 10 or more smaller ones. In some cases, they are even freeware that you just download and you run with it, and then you pay through the support that you need and other things. So it's a very wide spectrum of what you can buy out there, and it all depends on whether you want to get, a good service and something proven, or whether you have your own opinion about what you need and you want to go ahead and do a lot of programming yourself. In the end, we made a sourcing process. We consulted both the big ones and the small ones. We quickly concluded that between the money you save with the smaller ones, but the extra effort and risk you take, we discarded the option of going small, simply because we are a large company. We have a number of challenges. For example, just one example, the part numbers between the different plants are different, completely different system. In Luxembourg, we start with ABC. In other plants, they start with 902. We have 6 digits, the other have 12 digits. It's a complete mess. And if you buy a system, then the first thing it asks you is, okay, what format is your part number? Well, yeah, we have 6 of them. So we couldn't work with a system that wasn't, let's say, that was very flexible, but that wasn't even able to handle the complexity that we want to go for. So a small supplier or the freeware, I would say, is fine. If you're a small company, you don't want to spend a lot of money, but you want to have a system, it's a great thing. But if you have a certain size and you need different languages, in our case it includes Chinese, for example, and you need support in all countries, you very quickly figure out that there is 3 or 4 or 5 companies left that can actually serve you. And then the rest was a matter of, pricing, timing, availability, support, the usual criteria you apply when you source something.
Okay, thank you, Etienne. I propose that we go through the last part of your presentation, and I remind the participant that they can use either the chat or the question section to ask their question.
Okay, so we come back to Luxembourg. So the Luxembourg site, I mentioned before that 2 years ago, well, actually, it's now already 5 years ago, we started talking about expanding and bringing, let's say, all the engineering and administrative staff into the same building. Until now, we were scattered across the plant here in Steinzel. And the idea was to use the space. You see this building actually from the street, and to use that space to locate everyone in, let's say, a common area to, of course, enhance communication between people, but also modernize. And in that same context, the lab, so this is the R&D test and validation lab, was increased significantly. We added about 700 square meters. So we reached now over 1,000 square meters of lab space, and we purchased about 3 million worth of equipment to put into that lab. So it's thermomechanical testing, and I will get to it in a minute. I need to mention here that this happened under the subsidy regime from Luxembourg called RDI Infrastructure. So it's basically an innovation and research and development subsidy that subsidizes investment into R&D infrastructure. And we thought, okay, great, yeah, let's take it, let's do it. Why not? But of course, it comes with a condition, and the condition is that that lab be made available to exterior companies. Of course, why does the government do it? They do it because they want to maintain research and development in the country, but also attract other companies to the country, so that they find an environment that, let's say, tissue that allows them to come to the country and find support. In this case, support in terms of R&D facilities that they can use. So we signed that agreement. We built the lab, we put the investment, and I can go through it in a minute here. This is just a picture of the construction to so you know what's there. The largest number of pieces of equipment are thermal and climatic testing chambers. So the largest one is about 1 cubic meter, just to give you an idea of the size. And you put your components in there, and basically you cycle the temperature from the extremes I can mention are -70 to +300. Now, not every machine can do that range, but just to give you an idea of the range we work in. And then humidity from up to, I don't know the minimum, maybe 20% to up to close to 100% to meet the most common automotive standards for thermomechanical endurance. Then you also have thermal shock testing. It's pretty much the same, except now within the chamber you have 2 zones, and in one case actually 3 zones. On the top, typically a hot zone, let's say 180 degrees, and on the bottom a cold zone, let's say -40. And then you switch, your components are in your basket, and you switch from hot to cold and back from cold to hot to simulate, for example, driving through a water trough and affecting your components through thermal shock. This is very common validation equipment, but we multiplied it just because it takes a long time, in some cases 1,500 or 2,000 hours. So you can't run in sequence. You really need to duplicate some equipment to be able to handle all the projects that we do. Then on the right side, you see a vibration table. This is also new. In this case, you see the vibration solenoid, the coil here in horizontal direction, but it can also be rotated into vertical direction. That allows us to do three-dimension or 3-axis vibration, shock, or random vibration on components. The range here is between 5 and 2,500 hertz. The power is 80 kilonewton. The force is 80 kilonewton, so this is already big equipment. You can put an entire dashboard on there and run a typical automotive validation here. What's not shown on the picture is that there is also a thermal chamber, so you can actually also control the heat or even cycle the heat as you do vibration testing. Then moving on, IP testing. IP means indice de protection, so it's the testing for leak tightness against liquids or also dust. This is what is shown on the picture on the top left here is the Kershaw test, where you look at water intrusion into your products. The product is on the turning table below, and then you have basically water pressure from all directions. This can go up to 80 bar, I think, and 85 degrees C. On the right, material testing. Here we basically have only a standard X-ray and a 3D microscope. We were considering also a tomographic equipment, but in the end, for various reasons, we did not invest in that. So this remains classical material analysis. We did invest in an EMC chamber, electromagnetic compatibility testing. The size of the chamber is big enough for automotive components and also industrial or domestic equipment components. Frequency range currently up to 6 gigahertz, both for emissions and immunity. This piece of equipment was added late to the project, but with the electromobility and the new 5G and various other reasons, it became more and more obvious that we do need this facility to validate against electromagnetic requirements that are becoming more and more stringent very fast. And we also have a 3D printer to make our prototypes. So this should give you a flavor for what's here. Of course, anybody is welcome to visit this lab whenever you're available or coming by in Luxembourg. We're pleased to show it to you. Of course, the intent is to see if you're interested in using the lab. I'm sharing the website here so you can actually see and download brochures about the testing in a little more detail than what I just showed. And send us an email and say, look, I'm looking for a test for this kind of component. Is this something you can do? Can I get a quote? And then we will respond to you within a very short time. Maybe one last comment. We are by this convention that I just mentioned before, we are obliged to sell at market rate. So that's obviously driven by non-competition rules. So there's, for us, it's not, let's say, possible to either, let's say, try to make a lot of money out of this, nor to make a favor to someone and say, look, come to me and I'll give you some tests for free, or so. That doesn't work. We are really audited and bound to proven market pricing. That makes it easier in a certain way because there's no long discussions about the cost. And the other thing is that, of course, in terms of capacity, we have to see what's available. We have to reach a certain amount of capacity we share externally. We have not reached that yet. So at this time, we're actually looking for additional customers willing to do some testing in our facilities here. So I'm done with that. Do we have more questions?
Yes, Etienne, thank you, but you already answered one of them. So the question was if your test lab is open to external company or only for your own purpose, but you clearly explained that it's open to any company located or not located in Luxembourg that are willing to do some of the testing that are possible with your test equipment. That was a question from Georgi Taskov. Yes, already answered. Did I miss something? I'm just looking through the chat. Yes, that was
I see a few questions.
Yes, maybe you can read them if you want.
Yeah, from Tobias Hinterwimmer, Cebi General, are you supplying only OEM or also gray aftermarket? Well, we are supplying OEM, we are supplying service, we are supplying some aftermarket, but we're not, I would say, active on the independent aftermarket. I think when you mentioned gray, it's the independent aftermarket. This is one of the things that we looked at when we said, let's diversify, let's go and sell our products also independently to, service stations, supermarkets, and so on, which is obviously interesting. But this is one of the examples where we found, it's a completely different business environment. So we don't have any long-term contracts. It's more like an auction, one pallet here, one pallet there. And so you really need a different sales organization to do so. And it starts there and it doesn't end there. So we never made that step. But if you, let's say, are active in this market and you say, look, I have some experience to share, then I'd be interested to hear that, because I'm still a little sad that we dropped it so quickly, because I think it is an interesting market that we could easily serve. And then you also have a second question. You mentioned that you entered the bumper market. For me, this is a big change. You're coming from a hidden part to an static part. That is absolutely true. It ran smooth, yes. Let's say the thing that we don't do in-house is the painting in vehicle color, because this coloring is a complete different science in its own. So we provide a surface that is smooth enough, and in some cases prepared with the primer for painting. But then painting in vehicle color, we leave that up to usually the OEM itself. So that is let's say a little restriction. Then you have more questions regarding Industry 4.0. How big is the team working on the project? I think I answered that.
No, those one are already
I also
answered.
your second question there. Yeah. Is it possible as a private Lux company to run tests on some of your equipment? Yes, if you pay the market price. So that's what I mentioned.
And what about the timing to get the testing done? Is your lab fully booked right now, or do you have a free capacity?
It's well, free capacity. There is some free capacity, yeah, simply because not all equipment can run all the tests. So on one hand, you have a sort of a backlog of testing that you're pushing in front of you. On the other hand, you have some machines not operating because they are a bit specific. So I would say it depends on the type of test you want to do. Of course, we had one customer coming and saying that they need to have, I think it was 12 weeks in a row of a test on the vibration machine, and that would have blocked our vibration equipment for 12 weeks. So that was not possible to do it short term. Longer term, yes, but short term, no. But if it's 3 days, we can fit it in.
Okay. I have a question as well regarding testing. So obviously you test a product according to specification, and you issue a test report stating whether or not the part meets the specification. In case the part fails, do you as well provide some sort of recommendation to improve the product so that it can pass the specification?
No, we don't normally do that because that would be an engineering service, if you will. So a testing service is what? Really, you tell us what you want to test, you give us the part, we run the test according to the but we had parts here, for example, electronics that go to space. Okay, we have absolutely no competence in those. So I wouldn't say, you know, turn it in the other direction and it will survive the orbit. That would be really completely out of our competency. So we refrain from that. Of course, there is some exception. Let's say it's a customer we know, it's a spec we know, and we can share our experience testing for, you know, a certain customer against a certain spec. Yes, but typically we are not supposed to get involved in the design of the products that are being tested. So it's only pure execution of the test according to the requirements.
Okay, thank you, Etienne. I don't see any more questions on the list, so I believe it's time to conclude. No, there is maybe one last question.
There is one more question from Francesco Bruno. I understand that you have a very deep vertical integration in your company. Does it mean that everything is done in-house, or do you have also a purchasing department dedicated to sourcing stamped parts, material thickness, and so on? We saw some of these products. Yeah, so yes, we do have a purchasing department, so we don't dig everything out of the ground that we make. And yes, we do buy stamped parts. We do buy molded parts like O-rings, and in some cases also design parts, so that come with a certain, let's say, design. So we do not do everything in-house. It's classic purchasing. So I don't know which company this is, but if you have, let's say, certain products to offer, then just send me an email and I will forward it to purchasing for, you know, for consideration. This is I get emails like that every day, and I just send them on for to look at it. Who knows?
Okay, thank you, Etienne. So no more question. We are going to conclude. I believe that people are now convinced that we have not only banks in Luxembourg, but we have as well innovative industry, very competitive industry. As I said earlier, if some of the participants wants to put their company on the spotlight during one of the next TSV, so the technology site visit, feel free to get in touch either with myself or one of your local representatives, and we can surely organize that in the coming months. Usually we plan about one session like this every month, knowing that the project, the PAE project, will end up in a year from now, so in December 2022. So we have still room for about 10 to 12 presentation. So thanks again from my side for your participation. Thanks to you, Etienne, and the Cebi Group for the very interesting presentation. And we hope to seeing you soon for the next TSV presentation. As I said earlier, that will be the company V-Optics from France. It will take place in January, and the final date will be communicated soon on our website. So thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.